Your college football game day is come early.
He goes up high. He's got get away from the top
speed. Your college football game day is come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed. And the ball is free. Woo! What a hit. You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin. Presented by BetMGM.
And just like that, the college football playoff semifinals are behind us, and we're set for the national championship game. Welcome into BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack, and for the next hour, we got you. We are going to look back on those semifinal games in the Rose Bowl and Sugar Bowl, the wins by Michigan and Washington over Alabama and Texas, respectively. Look ahead to the national championship game and take a peek at this weekend's hoops action as well. All on the way, of course. You can watch it right here on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel if you're doing so. Hi, how are you? We appreciate you joining us every Thursday night here. And, of course, you're listening inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY, where it's available as a podcast as soon as it's ready for you, or live coast to coast on the BetQL network, either Friday night or Saturday morning. We appreciate you, however you're joining us this weekend for BetQLU. Let's take a look back at those semifinal games, and let's start, well, we'll just go chronologically, and we'll talk about the Rose Bowl first, boys. This was the one that it gave us some things that I don't think we necessarily thought we would get, at least that I thought we would get. Michigan, they cover the 2-point spread that it ended up landing at. 27-20 is the final. Alabama gets a final crack at the end, but they can't pull it off because at that point, Jalen Milroe not only was having to do gymnastics just to catch the snaps at that point in the game, but was then also running for his life more often than not. Sacked 6 times by Michigan on New Year's Day. And again, to bring it back to the quarterbacks, I'll own it. I thought Milroe would outplay J.J. McCarthy. Nope. J.J. McCarthy, even though Milroe didn't get much help from his offensive line, J.J. McCarthy in the clutch outplayed Jalen Milroe, Choppy. And so here we are. Michigan gets it to overtime. Wolverines beat the Tide. I thought Saban would cook up something, but in the end, he wasn't able to cook it up. And there were really times where it felt like Michigan, despite their special teams leaving this a game, Michigan had chances to pull away. And then, of course, Alabama would work their way back into the lead. I don't know. Michigan is just better, I guess, than a lot of us give them credit for at this point.
You know, that was a weird game because, like, it felt in the beginning like it was going to get away from Michigan. You know, Alabama had the early interception called back. They got the punt, the muffed punt touchdown. All right, they're up 7-0. Here we go. And then the fumble, the Milroe fumble, you know, when they were about to put a stranglehold in this thing. And I know Michigan didn't score off that, but that was an opportunity for Michigan, for Alabama right there to really put a stranglehold. They had chances, and I thought Saban, puckered up a little bit instead of going for it on 4th and 2, deciding to, kick a field goal or punt. I'll be honest, like a lot of things had to go right for Michigan in that game. I don't know. I still don't know how that pass that was tipped made it all the way to the receiver for a great catch, by the way. Like that ball is intercepted 99 out of 100 times. It's tipped up. It kind of goes errant. It didn't. It kept the same trajectory. The spiral was there. It was crazy luck that thing was able to go through. And then Michigan from that point on was unbeatable.
Yeah, and this thing clears the total by a point and a half too, John. Michigan, again, I'm gonna just give credit where maybe it's been due all year, but we didn't see them have to put it into practice other than against Ohio State and to a lesser extent against Penn State. Michigan looked like the better team, especially down the stretch, despite the mistakes they made. I think for my money, they did end up looking like the better team.
Well, first of all, Happy New Year, guys.
Same to you, my friend.
Here, man.
I mean, we just skipped all the pleasantries, got right to
All
it.
of them.
You know. By the way, did you guys hear like a smacking sound? I apologize for that. I was not looking up anything inappropriate in that event. It was an odd screen that is godforsaken ad that runs at all hours of the night, and it's called Spank Odds, and so it sounds like a spanking.
Yeah.
That's how I monitor the live ad. The
Right.
live odds.
Don Whitlock over here.
This right here is an ad for just sticking to BetMGM, my friends.
Yeah.
Spank odds? That sounds like something they would put in a South Park plot, my man. Spank odds.
Man. No,
Hey,
it's crazy.
guys, I found a
yeah.
plus 125 on spankodds.com, guys.
Yeah, they have all the odds, man. From BetMGM, everywhere they update them live. Anyway, I've closed it. You're not going to have to worry about that from here on out, okay? At least for this episode. But yeah, look, we talked about this before the game, and I had a change of heart. Not going to lie to you guys. I'm not too proud to admit that. You know, I thought this was going to be a spot where Alabama rolled. I think I called it a biblical beatdown, and by the time the game rolled around, I didn't have anything in pre-game. I just could not get there on Bama. A couple of sharp groups did play Michigan -2, and that got up 2.5 before kick. And I just wanted to watch the game and just kind of see, you know, from there what it looks like. And I ended up hitting Michigan -2.5, 105 live because I thought that there was an offensive line disparity. That was, and there was for, you know, a majority of the game. Now, credit to Nick Saban for adjusting in the second half. And he wasn't dropping Jalen Milroe back nearly as much. He was leaning on that running game. But, look, Michigan did things in that game that were uncharacteristic both to the good and to the bad. Uncharacteristically good, that drive down 20-13. They had never been in a situation like that before all year long. And they come back and they force overtime. Uncharacteristically bad. The special teams play, the muff punts, all of that. And they still beat Alabama by a touchdown. So I thought that was as impressive as it gets in college football, especially when you consider all the small things that Michigan didn't do well that they usually do. And I know we're going to get to it, but I think that spells bad things for Washington.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way as well. And you're right. We'll get into a preview of the national title game in a couple minutes here on BetQLU. But let's pivot to the late game, to the Sugar Bowl game. Washington ends up going off as a 3.5-point dog. I saw there were a couple spots where it got real high, where it pushed up to 5.5. But for the most part, it was 3.5. Money line was right around plus 140, 150, except, again, for one weird spot where it was way off. But point remains, Washington wins outright, and Texas made it feel closer, I think, than it was late in that ball game with the repeated chances to come back in that one. But Michael Penix goes off 430 yards, a couple of touchdowns. This pair of receivers is ridiculous, Adunze and Polk. And Kalen DeBoer now, I don't care if it's NAIA, if it's D2, D1, FBS, FCS, has only lost 11 football games in his coaching career, which is kind of ridiculous. I want to believe, like I was talking with the guys on the Daily Tip about this earlier this week. I want to believe that Washington can finish the job. But like you said, John, it just feels like Michigan did so much in that Rose Bowl game that backed up a few of the things we saw against Ohio State, maybe a couple of the things we saw against Penn State, that you go, oh, yeah, we may not like them, but this is Michigan's year.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's been the best team in football, you know, and I know Georgia's statement in the Florida State game what was that, the Cotton? That wasn't the Cotton Bowl. What bowl was that? Doesn't really matter.
Orange Bowl, right?
Yeah, the Orange Bowl. Yeah, I mean that was a hell of a way to go out. But Michigan's still sitting here undefeated, and they've beaten the SEC champion, and they've beaten Ohio State, and they've beaten Penn State. And whatever those teams went on to do in their bowl games is not really relevant to me. You're talking about 2 top 5, top 10 teams, 3 when you consider Alabama now. So, look, I just don't think there's really any hurdle that this Michigan team isn't prepared for. I think the game plan is going to be very simple against Washington. But I will say, just for Washington and their part in this, they have been completely slighted by the market in every big game this year, except the home game against Oregon. And that was really just a home field advantage, -3. Here you go. Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. And they have spit in the face of the market at every turn. Is this going to be the same, or is this the part where the market's finally right? I don't know. With that being said, that performance from Penix in this game is as good a quarterback performance as I can remember. So, look, they deserve to be here. Can they win it? Can they pull it off again? I think that's really unlikely, but they are a deserving finalist in these playoffs, no question about it.
Choppy, let me ask you this question about the quarterbacks. Did we all underestimate Michael Penix? I guess because I kept coming back to him, especially later in the year. I remember us having the conversations about Penix, and he was dinged up for a time. His wide receivers were dinged up. They were playing games on the road in Corvallis and other places. And Penix had a couple of stat lines that, just to be quite honest, weren't that great. And that's why he fell out of the Heisman race as he did in the last couple of weeks. Is Penix maybe the best quarterback in college football this year?
Oh, he's been the best quarterback in college football since the start. People just didn't want to give him the Heisman for whatever reason. I mean, I know he's 30 years old, but that's he was the best player. He should have been the Heisman Trophy winner. I'd have voted for him. You saw this week against Texas why he was the best quarterback in the league and why they're undefeated. I mean, if I had to use one word to describe that football game, I would just simply say dimes. Like, that dude was dropping them in hands. And that's not like those receivers were wide open. Okay, they were blanketed. And he put them in spots. They didn't have to move their hands. They could have caught those with their eyes closed. That was one of the most impressive deep ball performances I've seen in a college game in years. So, I mean, he is easily the best quarterback in the country. We thought Jalen Milroe was the better quarterback than J.J. McCarthy. We know Michael Penix is. And that's the difference. Like, this guy is an NFL quarterback. And he's playing in the championship game against a guy who, I mean, he may get a look. He may get like an undrafted free agent spot. But, I mean, he's probably more XFL, UFL, whatever they call it now. You know what I mean? He's a college guy. J.J. McCarthy's a classic college quarterback. He's not going to be this great NFL player. Michael Penix is going to be a first-round draft pick. There is a massive quarterback disparity in this game.
Well, Michigan's favored by 4.5 across the board right now, wherever you look. That's as of Thursday night, January 4th. So we'll see if that moves at all in the next couple of days, but it feels like it's pretty solid. And again, we'll get into that game specifically in a lot more detail in just a couple of minutes. One last thing I kind of wanted to look back on, and we talked a bunch last week and even the week before during our bowl special about the quality of some of these bowl games. The quality of the playoff games, great, right? Like, we've had playoff games before in the semifinal era, the CFP era, where we got a couple of duds and maybe a decent game in the national title game. Hopefully the national title game holds up to the semis in this case. But when we're going to go from 3 playoff games this year in the last 6 or 7 years to next year, all of a sudden we're going to have 11 playoff games. Like, and I don't, do you guys have a feeling that we're going to get as good a quality, especially in the quarterfinal games, right? Or the play-in games, I guess, if you want to call them that, the 5 through 12 games next year that we've had this year in the semifinals, John?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree totally. And I mean, you were talking about, like, let's just, like, Ole Miss, Penn State, that's going to be a playoff game, right? It just is. And I know, like, it ended up being 38-25, but, like, that was one of the games where there were limited opt-outs, right? It was competitive. Like, Clemson, Kentucky. I don't think that would have been a playoff game, but you hope for more games like that. I mean, it just felt like you could count on one hand the bowl games this year where both teams cared about it and didn't, have a ton of opt-outs that, again, wasn't a playoff game itself.
Georgia, Florida State.
Yeah, like, exactly. They just had a ton of, Florida State was friggin' marred. Oregon Liberty, but I mean, that was just a bug meat windshield, and it was probably always going to be that. But everybody played. There were very limited opt-outs, and Bo Nix and those guys were into the fourth quarter. I mean, that's what it'll look like, right? When the group of 5 team gets in, that'll be most likely it'll be that lopsided. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was a good finish. It was a really bad start and middle for bowl season, but I thought it was a really good finish, especially obviously when you consider both playoff games were fantastic.
Yeah, it was a good finish. And, look, I mean, I do think that, because of the transfer portal, the disparity at the top has been saved a little bit. It's not so much the same as it used to be. I mean, these games were never within 2 touchdowns, ever, prior to last year. And the transfer portal really kicked. So now I think you're getting more competitive games. My concern is going to be, obviously, the group of 5 winner. Sorry, John, I know. Elitist SEC guy over here, but like the group of 5 winner, might get punched,
Yeah.
And then let's just say the group of 5 winner isn't the 12 seed, the 12 against the 5, Georgia this year, Florida State, maybe not because of their quarterback situation, but Georgia was going to whoop up on anybody they played. Georgia, I mean, you watch those 2 games over the weekend. I mean, you could sit here, if you're Georgia, you'd be like, guys, we could have beat Michigan that night. We could have beat Michigan. You know what I mean? So,
if Georgia plays Liberty this year, I don't think it's a pretty ball game. Not at all, if that's the 5-12 in a given year. Let's dive back into the national title game, though, and let's talk about what we expect from Washington and Michigan. And you guys both mentioned the portal. There are a couple interesting names that have already hit the portal. If we have time, we'll touch on that as well. And then pivot towards hoops as well with a big weekend. Some teams trying to bounce back in that regard as well. All on the way alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. You're locked in to BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Feels like we've pushed most of the non-conference play behind us, and conference play picking back up in earnest around college basketball. We'll get into it. A bunch of big games this weekend. Some teams trying to bounce back. In some cases, teams playing each other, and they're both trying to bounce back. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes here on BetQLU, live in your Odyssey app, AUDACY. It's free. Download it today and take us with you wherever you're headed. Live coast to coast on the BetQL network. If it's a Friday night or Saturday morning, you got us. Us being me, Chris Mack, alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. We are with you on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel as well every Thursday night. And before we get into hoops, guys, before we get into some of those big transfers that took place late in the week as well, if we have a couple minutes to talk about them, because the portal did come up when we were talking about Michigan and Washington pushing through to the college football national championship game in a pair of really good semifinals. Let's talk about the game itself. Number 2, Washington. Number 1, Michigan. Wolverines favored by 4.5. They'll play at NRG Stadium in Houston. Michigan, 4th on the board to win the national title before the season started at 10-1. Washington was 13th on the board at 35-1. And I guess from a betting angle, Choppy, that's the storyline here for me, is that Washington has been doubted all year long. We've brought that storyline up, especially a lot in the last 4 to 6 weeks or so. And that started out at the beginning of the year, and now here we are going into a national title game where, and you put it very succinctly and very well, I think we all agree, the better quarterback is clearly Michael Penix over J.J. McCarthy, but here comes Michigan in that defense that tortured Jalen Milroe, and they're favored by 4.5 in this one.
Listen, I appreciate the kind words. I try to put things as succinctly as possible. This is... They have been disrespected, I think. They've played a much tougher slate throughout the course of the last 4 months than Michigan has. Look, I have bet Washington already. I had them at 4. I got them at 4.5. I took that bet. I put the money on Washington for the national championship game. I look at the quarterback matchup. I think it's very, very difficult to figure out. They're not going to get the benefit of going up against Jalen Milroe, who, I mean, when he's going good, he's fine, but when he's not, I mean, he looks like he's skipping rocks out there, man. Like, he is throwing the ball into the ground. He doesn't know where it's going. He can move, but there are times when his throws just aren't there. That will come with maturity and age, and as he gets more comfortable at the college level. But he still is a first-year starter. What did you expect? Like, this is a little bit different. So, they're not going to get – Michigan's not going to get the benefit of playing against a quarterback that's not as seasoned. They're going to play against an NFL most likely first-round draft pick. That ain't easy to go up against. I don't know that they faced one all year.
No, they didn't. And – I think so. Here's my question then, John. Am I leaning too much into recency bias? Because again, I questioned McCarthy all year because he didn't play anybody, and now all of a sudden he has a couple quality drives in a fourth quarter against Alabama. Is that putting too much stock in those couple in that quarter and a half of football that we saw basically, and just turning my back on everything I saw for the first 3 months of the season?
No, I mean, I think the game works both ways here, right? No, Michigan has not seen a quarterback of Michael Penix Jr.'s caliber, no doubt about that. But Washington has not seen a defense in the same stratosphere as what they're about to see with Michigan on Monday night. And I think that's a big distinction. I really do. I'm a firm believer that defense wins championships. And I think the game plan is really simple for Michigan. It's keep the ball, right? So it's lean on a steady diet of Blake Corum, simple stuff with J.J. McCarthy. Maybe you have some option in there for him, right? And just grind that clock out and make Michael Penix have to play perfect football because his possessions are going to be so few and far between. That's the game plan. That's Michigan's path to success. Because look, I mean, he was freaking amazing against Texas, and I have no doubt that if he's on the field a lot, he's going to eventually find some success. The key for Michigan, and where I think they'll be successful, is by just keeping the ball away from them and leaning on that defense that's just not great, right? Like, it's really just not that good. So I think they're going to have a lot of quorum and a lot of first downs and a lot of possession time, therefore really limiting Michael Penix's window of making magic. And that's why I bet Michigan minus 4.5. I bet it on Monday night. I just feel like they're going to have, because that's the way they play, the way they've always played. You know that, Chris. I mean, you watch every Michigan game there in Big Ten country. You know what it's like. So I think they're going to have success doing that against a Washington team that is, going to be stepping up in a major way in terms of defensive opposition.
So you guys know I like to try and find comps. We all like to try and find comps when we're trying to pit two teams against each other who haven't played each other before. And I think it's a really good point that they haven't played a quarterback anywhere near Michael Penix Jr.'s caliber this year. Like, the best quarterback they probably, I mean, was it Tagovailoa in Maryland? And they almost lost that game that Michigan played this year. And then conversely, I think there's a good point as well. Well, Washington, you said it, John, hasn't played a defense like Michigan's all year. What's the best defense they played? Probably Oregon. I mean, that's the one that jumps out, I think, to everybody. So is the gulf between what Michigan has played against at quarterback this year, from Talia Tagovailoa to Michael Penix Jr., that much bigger than, say, the gulf from an Oregon defense to a Michigan defense? And now we're doing comps on comps on comps. But Choppy, this is where we're trying to stack all this stuff up on top of each other, and it's why eventually comps on comps on comps leads me back to, well, what did I see most recently, regardless of who it was against? And I saw J.J. McCarthy finally show me something that I haven't seen from him really yet to this point in his career, and against a really good Alabama defense.
Yeah, and it may not be the same kind of Alabama defense that they're accustomed to. And
Sure.
Let's not forget, I mean, Penix did this against a Texas team that, I mean, they're loaded with talent. Like, Texas has got talent on talent on talent. It just hasn't realized yet. Like, they're a loaded up team. So I think it's going to be a really, really solid game. I look at it, though, like from the Penix has not faced a defense or a defensive line as good as Michigan's, but I think we all know that, defenses are really at the mercy of how good the other team's offense is a lot of times in a passing league that we've become accustomed to. Guys get rid of the ball. Good quarterbacks, they say sacks are now a quarterback stat. Great quarterbacks don't take sacks because they make the smart decision, the right read, they cut the right protection. I don't know, man. Like, this is going to be a fascinating kind of chess match between the Michigan defense and their pass rush and Penix's ability to get the ball out quick.
The other thing here too, John, is 56.5. I think that's where the total's at right now. Most places, just about everywhere. I understand. We're talking about Michigan's defense being involved in this thing. And if I go back, I want to scroll back and look real quick at Michigan's totals throughout the year. So let's see, 3 of their last 4 and 5 of their last 7, they've gone over the total. I think 56.5 feels too low. Like, this feels like it might be tight. It might come down to a walk-off field goal, but this feels like a 31-28 to me. Something in that range where both teams, it feels like what we got from Washington and Oregon when they met.
Like that. I mean, it needs to be 33-28. All right? It doesn't need to be 31-28. We're not playing these games. You're going to have to give me 33-28. Yeah, no, look, I think, you consider the Michigan side of it. It's like, their defense will be successful. Okay. But I think it's their offense, arguably, that may find a little bit more success relative to expectations, if that makes sense, right? People sort of have this perception of Michigan's offense that it's like it's going to grind it out. But I think that's really more of of a testament to the Big Ten than it is, Michigan's offense just stinks. No, because we saw when they play a team from a fake conference like the Big 12 last year, they put up 45. So I suspect they'll have the ability to do that again. On Monday. The question is going to be, can they stop, Washington enough? Which I say yes. I don't love taking the over on this game. Because I feel like Michigan's defense is going to be successful, and I think their game plan is going to be. Now, look, they're not going to like dive at the 1 yard line on a 98-yard breakaway, but I just think they're going to have a more conservative game script in terms of take what the defense gives us. There's not a lot of explosion there, and I don't see this being a back and forth, affair. Could be totally wrong, but I just don't see it playing out like that.
For what it's worth, Michael Penix has beaten Michigan more recently than the Ohio State Buckeyes have. November 7th, 2020, he and the Hoosiers beat Michigan, and Ohio State has not beaten the Wolverines since November 30th, 2019. It's for all my Buckeye friends out there. Real quick, I want to touch on
conference, by the way, on the Big 12. It's been a pretty brutal bowl season for them. It just has.
And you're trying to push Choppy's buttons, but he's an SEC elitist, even though he lives in Big 12 country now, and he is the master. He will jump on that horned frauds bandwagon faster than anybody, including yourself.
I'm sorry, sir. I am smack dab in the middle of SEC country here, man. A&M, Texas, Oklahoma.
The stars at night are big and bright.
Yep.
All of a sudden, it's SEC country.
I am closer to Fayetteville, Arkansas than Lubbock, Texas. I am smack dab in the middle of SEC country out here, where I belong. Okay, Rocky Top's home, sweet home to me, and so is the SEC, baby.
Wouldn't it be like a 12-hour, 15-hour drive to Knoxville for you?
About 12. Yeah, about 12.
Yeah,
10 to 12.
Okay.
A little different than when I was in school. The speed limit was 55.
Real quick, I wanted to touch on this. I guess a frat at the University of Washington, way back at the beginning of the season, got $25 from each member of the fraternity, and they put up a bet on Washington to win a national championship, and now they've got a chance to win about $50,000. It net them about 40. 18-1 they placed the bet when they placed the bet. A $50,000 frat party. Which of the three of us, if invited to a $50,000 frat party, dies first?
Man, that's a good question.
I don't know. Do I volunteer myself as tribute? I don't know.
There's no way. First of all, there's no way Choppy survives. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah, I would like to believe we could navigate without any of us dying. Although we're not built the way we used to be. So
yeah, I already have liver problems, so it might be me.
Aside from a stack of kegs like 50 feet high and a full service bar, what else are you getting for a $50,000 frat party? Within legalities.
I mean,
yeah. Where?
It's in Washington.
There's a lot of ways you can go there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places.
Okay.
There's a lot of ways you can go.
Chris trying to get us canceled on the first show of 24, man.
Yeah.
I'm just testing the limits.
You're trying to see.
Because I mean,
what
we can do a lot.
Here.
We can do a lot. You know what I'm saying? But it's going to be a little too hot for BetQLU, man.
That's why I mentioned legalities and local statutes being what they are at the University of Washington. I think it's fair to just ask the question.
I'm going to need to read over them before I can give you a good answer.
I can't help it that you two degenerates immediately go to livestock and petroleum jelly and other. I mean, look.
Hey.
We've all been to tequila.
I don't know how Pittsburgh
we've all been to Tijuana, boys. We've all been to Tijuana.
Yeah. No, I think I'd leave the farm animals out of the equation, but who knows?
Hey, Things get
I'll be in
crazy when you
Vegas
start
next
betting
month,
on.
so why not? Let's figure it out.
When you start betting big multiple zeros on Mason Rudolph, that life comes at you pretty fast, John. So I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Ain't that the damn truth? You're living fast there, buddy, in the fast lane.
Things heat up on the hardwood this weekend in conference in just about every spot in a slate of a bunch of big games, both Friday night and Saturday night, depending on when you're listening to this. Some of these may be previews, some of these may not, but we'll talk about a handful of big games coming up as conference play really starts to take off. Coming up next, alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack, and you are listening to BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And welcome back in every Thursday night on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel and every Friday night and Saturday morning on the BetQL Network, live coast to coast, also inside your Odyssey app whenever you want it as a podcast, AUDACY. It's free. Download it today. This is BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack, and we've talked national championship game and our thoughts on Washington and Michigan. If you missed it, rewind, go back and check it out. And also our thoughts on the way the two semifinals played out. But let's turn to hoops as we've got at least a handful of interesting conference games. The conference schedule picking back up around most of the country. Non-cons just about all behind us. Of those big games this weekend, boys, which ones are you most looking forward to? We got Illinois Purdue on Friday night, which, as some people listen to this, may already be over. But you got UNC Clemson, who just lost to Miami earlier this week. That early on Saturday afternoon. A couple of big SEC matchups: Auburn, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and you've got Providence trying to bounce back at Creighton the middle of Saturday afternoon as well in the Big East. And you've got the Big 12 with, I believe, the top two teams in net ranking right now. BYU and Houston as the two newcomers to the conference. That conference gets no easier. So, John, give me what you're most looking forward to this college basketball weekend.
Yeah, nice to turn the page to tall ball, as I call it. You know, tall ball. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Tell me all about the AAC, John, please.
Yeah, we're not ready for that yet. Y'all ain't ready for that breakdown, man. When I feel y'all are ready for that, I'll offer that to y'all. But I right now I'm seeing two guys that just can't handle that. So maybe a few weeks from now. No, I think the SEC is probably where my attention will be this weekend. Auburn, Arkansas is definitely a very, very good game. Auburn's playing sort of above expectations. I think they're really good. I mean, I watched them against USC because I was just kind of curious, not so much about Auburn, but like, what is this USC team all about with Bronny kind of back? And Auburn just dog walked them. I mean, that's not necessarily. I mean, I know it's there, but still, it's a Power 5 team with some really talented players on it, and Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier, who's going to the NBA draft. Like, and they dominated them from the jump as an 8-point favorite. Arkansas, as we know, is always a team that's going to get better as the season goes on. So my attention will most likely be on the SEC this weekend in that race.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a Tennessee guy, so obviously I'll be on the Ole Miss Tennessee game. But man, I'll definitely tune into that Auburn Arkansas game. Arkansas at home, it's kind of a nasty team, and quite honestly, I also want to look at that Providence Creighton game for a couple of reasons. Not the least of which is that I just lost the Providence game the other night, and I'm still bitter, and I'm going to root against them every chance I get for the rest of the way. That's kind of part of it.
Petty.
They had no business.
Very petty.
What's that? Yeah, very, very,
petty.
Seton Hall's a good squad. They shouldn't have won that game the way they did. I mean, that was an easy game. It was an easy game to pick. It just popped out to me, so I'm just a little bit bitter. So a little petty on this one, and I'm going to be in on that game too.
Yeah, I like the idea of seeing what if Providence can bounce back against Creighton. Because the Big East is just real hard beyond UConn to handicap for me right now. And so, I want to believe the Big East, I think, is better at the top than maybe it is. And I guess that's the next question. Like, SEC, I think, has sort of I wouldn't say distance itself. It feels like it's starting to separate itself from the pack as far as being number 2 behind the Big 12, which is just an absolute murderer's row right now. But then the Big East feels like it's next for me. Like, if we're handicapping conferences right now or power ranking conferences, which is always important when we get a little bit closer to tournament time and we're trying to decide which teams are going. The Big East should be a solid 3. But it's just beyond UConn. What else are we confident in right now, John, in the Big East? Like, And UConn,
I'm not even confident in UConn without Klingon.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very different without him, and he's, I'm not sure that foot is going to be something that he entirely recovers from. When he's in and he's like even 80%, I mean, he's just a complete. He flips the game with his size, and people don't even want to, attack him. They don't even want to attempt him at all. When he's out, they're just different, as any team would be, right? As any team would be when you don't have a 7'2" guy, who can move a little bit in there. So I don't know. Villanova has had its moments this year, obviously beating Creighton, winning the battle for Atlantis, but they'll have some flat out stupid losses too. I mean, they lost to every freaking team in Pennsylvania, and which is just, it makes no sense to me. So it's like, do I trust them? I guess so, because their guys are a little bit more experienced. They have more veterans on that group. But if it's a team from Pennsylvania and they're playing Villanova in the NCAA tournament or something, I don't know how it would happen. But if it's Drexel or Temple or Penn gets in there, watch out, because your run is over, Villanova.
Yeah, I think they're safe on the western side of the state, though. Like, I don't think Villanova's getting bounced by Robert Morris. I think they're okay. Maybe Pitt on a good day, although Pitt looked like trash in the second half against UNC the other night.
They did.
The one I really, because UNC wanted to keep them in that game. They were dying to keep them in that game. The one game I think I like the most on the weekend, though, and like I said, depending on when people are listening to this, the game may already have been played, and I may sound like a giant dummy, is Illinois Purdue. And 8, if that's where the spread ends up landing, just sounds too big for me. I know it's a Big Ten road game, which makes it a little bit of a different animal, Choppy, but Illinois getting 8 at Purdue, again, Big Ten home court advantage is a different animal than almost any other conference aside from the Big 12, but 8 feels a little too much there for me anyway.
It is quite a bit. Illinois, though, let's see. I mean, like, they did lose on the road to my Vols by 13, and Tennessee is not as good as Purdue. And I know it's a conference game, but I mean, that's just, I know it's not really you can't use that transitive property and everything, but like, I don't know. I think there's a big gap between the Purdues and the Illinois of the world. I think there's enough gap. It's a little bit much for me. I probably would stay away from that number. But that certainly is an entertaining game. Especially you want to see, who's available, who's healthy, but also a look ahead towards later on in the season when it comes to, seedings and everything like that. If Illinois can get this win, I mean, that's a massive, massive quad 1 win they'd be getting towards the selection committee.
Yeah, although, John, they're now dealing without Terrence Shannon Jr. for don't know how long.
Ever. He's gone.
Ever.
Yeah, he's not coming back.
Yeah, ever.
Although we've seen
that's a problem.
We've seen guys, look at Alabama last year, have players somehow it feels like, though, once you're pulled off the court and you're done.
I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, that is different. That is different.
So.
But yeah, that could end up being the thing that pulls the plug on Illinois this year. The one thing I will come back to,
Illinois are different than Alabama anyway. The law is a little bit different in Illinois versus Alabama. Let's be fair on that one.
I think when you get to a certain point, it's probably the same everywhere. But in all seriousness, like the ACC is another conference I keep looking at when we power rank conferences, where it's like, what is going on here? Clemson, like I said, maybe Miami's the best team in the ACC. Maybe that's it, John. I don't know.
It feels like a 4-bid league, man. It's like I don't know. It's crazy. I mean, it's going to be more than a 4-bid league. We know that, but it's definitely like it doesn't feel as dominant as it should. Probably
find teams outside of, like, there are probably 4 default teams in the ACC, right? Miami, Clemson, UNC, Duke, whether we like it or not, right? So
I would probably have Virginia in there, although I could listen to the argument. I could listen to the
Yeah.
argument though. I don't know that it's like a guarantee. Their resume's not great.
Yeah, it's such a. And it's been so weak for so long now, Choppy. That's the thing that always jumps out to me. Good point by producer Zach. Wake, they've won 8 in a row for what it's worth, 9-1 in their last 10. But the ACC is just not what it used to be.
Oh, no, it's not. And it hasn't been for a while. And that's part of the problem look, they sold out for football. The ACC sold out for football, and it created a different dynamic. And it killed programs. Like Syracuse hasn't been the same since they went to the ACC. They don't have that natural rivalry anymore. It's just a different ball game, man. And every conference has to go through this. Like, the Big 12, they actually, throughout all this conference realignment, they became a better basketball conference. Like, it's really strange how that happened. They became a great basketball conference. The SEC has become much better as well. It's but the ACC, they've really struggled for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the expansion. I don't know what the reason is. If Duke and Carolina they carried the banner for decades. They did. They carried the banner. They carried it for decades, and it's just not the same anymore.
Before we wrap up, let's get some folks our best bets. We don't care where it comes from. Doesn't have to be national championship game. Doesn't have to be hoops. It can be anything you want. So, Choppy, get us started. What's your best bet for the weekend?
All right, I got a little college football. I got Washington plus the 4.5. In that one, that's my one. But I can do a little 3-team pizza money parlay for you in the NFL style. If you can still, I got it at 5.5. I don't think you can anymore. I took Titans 5.5, Giants plus 5, and the Commanders plus the 13. Dak Prescott cannot throw in cold weather. It's gonna be in the 40s. He's got that plate in his thumb. Can't get it loose, man. It's too stiff.
All right, John, what you got?
We are going to the Chinese Basketball Association.
Stop it.
Perfect.
Got the
Real
Nemo
DGen stuff.
plus 18 against the Flying Tiger. No, you said it could come from anywhere, man.
Hey,
no,
I'm throwing the door open.
Yeah, I've got 2. I've got, and I this pains me. It really does. I don't want to fade him. I love this young man. I really do. He's got such a bright future. But I'm fading him on Saturday. I'm going Colts plus 1, getting it done, winning and in against the rookie QB. And then I am going to lay the 4.5. I've already laid the 4.5 with Michigan. Go Blue. Welcome home. Las Vegas bound for Jim Harbaugh. He is bringing championship culture to the nation.
It's his last game, huh?
That's it, man. Last one. We're on top.
Makes me feel real dirty. I'm not going to go either side. I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to go total. Washington, Michigan, and if you're going over, you should probably go Washington too, but I don't care. I'm just going total. Over the 55.5 on Monday night in the national championship game. Those are our best bets for this week here on BetQLU. Thanks again for joining us inside your Odyssey app, live coast to coast on the BetQL network or on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel. We thank you, as always, for RJ Choppy, for John Martin, for producers Zach and Dan. I am Chris Mack, and thanks again for joining BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.